We are getting started momentarily. Hello, all. It is gorgeous outside. We are receiving guests here. I have a sign-in sheet. And we will be starting in 1 minute, no matter what. If you're out there watching on Facebook, please give me your name and where you're watching from. We are in Talladega, Alabama at the Talladega Public Library. And today we're going to be talking about Black history to the future. It is Black History Month, and we will have some time for discussion towards the end. So I hope that I can bring something to you that will be useful this Black History Month. So this is a hybrid discussion, which means we are online, we are on Zoom, we are live on Facebook, as well as live at the library. And hey, Kahinde from Nigeria, hello. And we've got Rich from Miami, Florida. Thank you guys for joining me. These are associates. They often are with me for Tap In on Friday, a podcast. And I definitely appreciate you being here with me today for this discussion on Black history and our future. So I am going to open and then I'm going to share a presentation for you. If you have any problems with technology, just let me know in the chat. I can see your chat on Facebook, and we have a guest here in the library. So in person, you can just yell out to me and we'll move forward. But it is greatly an honor for me to be here with you at the library. I've never been asked to speak for Black History Month. Personally, Black History Month is very important to me. As we know, it was began by Carter G. Woodson in 1927 as a way to ensure that we could continue to talk about history in many cases where we know that Black Americans or Black people in the world, that their histories have been often restricted, silenced, and changed by people who have more power to discuss. So Black History Month is a great opportunity for us to be able to tell our own personal stories and learn from other people who have been able to do that. So I'm going to share my presentation with you, and I hope that you enjoy. I won't be able to see your comments while I am in my presentation, but I definitely will be continue to put them if you have questions or concerns. And when the presentation closes, we will review following that. Can you see the presentation there? Okay, so again, our discussion today is Black history to the future. And why is that important to me? Well, first, history is based on interpretation. Who is telling the story? So today, I'm telling my slice of the story, my perspective. And so, who am I? I am a graphic artist. I am also known as the governor of the NANBPWC Incorporated Southeast District, and that's a long acronym, and we're going to talk more about it later. But that is the National Association of Negro Business and Professional Women's Clubs Incorporated. It was one of many organizations that were formed. This one was in the 1930s, 1935, but they were formed because at that time, African Americans weren't allowed into these or larger organizations that were often used to protect and provide for communities of people. So this one particularly was formed by business and professional women, and it still holds the name Negro. And we'll talk more about the name Negro later. And then I'm also the creator of BX Next. BX Next means Baker, and the X is kind of the unknown or the plus. And Next is just about self-improvement, which is something that everybody knows me knows that I'm big on. I'm also the author of Side Hustle Glow Up, which you see over there in the bottom left corner, which is a book that I wrote to encourage people who might have been dibbling and dabbling in art to push it further into business. I'm also a podcaster. You can see over here flashing Friday night podcast right here live on Facebook, which is also about self-improvement and taking personal accountability in your life and your growth. And then I'm a tech adventurer. I'm not a coder. I'm not a person that sits down there and writes code. Like, I am a person that is completely interested in learning on my own and being able to teach and help other people who typically are consumers in the technology space so that we can use it to the best of our ability. And finally, I'm just a human observer. I'm an observer of what I hope is the truth, and I am not a historian. So I'm saying that to preface the other things that I'm going to talk about, but I'm going to share some of the things that I observed that I think are important, people and situations that I believe are very relevant to this Black History Month and to you. So what I'm going to try to impress on you today is that history has happened to us, and we can't change history. But what we can do is we can build legacy. So what is legacy? Legacy is intentional, right? Legacy is you taking from history what has happened and building something that's useful and honorable, right? So in my family, my grandmother's generation immigrated to the United States. She was a housekeeper, but we bought property. That was a part of our family legacy. My mother went to college, to Florida A&M University. Her education was a part of that legacy. When she went to nursing school, her nursing school was still, she went to Grady Nursing School at a time where it was still segregated. But building on her education and her experience, I've been able to intentionally build on that legacy. In my household, books were always important. We're going to talk about a lot of books today, and which is perfect here in the library. So that is my legacy. And I'm here to tell you about how I hope that you too will consider and take seriously what your legacy is, right? That we cannot necessarily change history, but we can intentionally build legacy. So what better time to talk about this than Black History Month? So who says what history should be discussed? Who decides what's relevant, right? So when you're building that legacy, if, as I said, if history or the archive is the material, the bricks, the code, the legacy is the house, the structure that you're building from that material. So who says what material we should build from? Do we build with bricks? Do we build with straw? Do we build at all? Are you capable of building it all? So I ask you, what will you be building? Have you thought about it? When you're on social media, when you're on your phone, are you consciously thinking about what you're building? So I decided to have this talk because I wasn't conscious about it. I was an artist. I was posting stuff on social media, but I had not put a lot of thought into the fact that this is my digital footprint and yours is yours. Have you put any thought into it, or are you just kind of being pulled along, doing what everybody else does? Is there any thought whatsoever as to what you're leaving? So today I'm going to share with you people who really did put some thought into what was being left. And I hope that after you see them and hear what they've done, that you too will be inspired to do the same, to build a legacy. So I want to begin with this thought about Black history is not behind us. It is actively writing our future. And I also believe that Black history is not an isolated history. It's a part of a whole history. In America, in the world, we cannot separate the experience of Black people, even though it has been restricted in many cases. I want to encourage you, and it doesn't matter, in my opinion, what you identify with, that your words, and I'm going to show you some people who contributed greatly to the story of Black history in great ways that may not have identified as Black. You may not identify as Black, And then for what I want to share with you today, that is completely not necessary. But instead, just being mindful that I invite you to be a part of building this legacy. Hello. So a bigger part of my discussion is that I'm arguing that legacy is code, right? And what's code, right? Words are code. Every letter attributes to a number, attributes to a meaning, and code is only relevant when you look at the context that is being used. So what does it mean if I put a disc into a record player, right? Or if I put my phone's code into my laptop, it won't work, or it won't work as designed. So code is meaningless if, again, if it's not intentional and if it's not designed for the purpose. So as I'm asking you to think intentionally about your legacy, I'm also asking you to think intentionally about what code means. And as we talk about Black history, I'm going to show you a lot of examples of where Black history has been encoded, is still coded, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful code when worked and in the context that it is received properly. So again, I ask you, as I asked earlier, who is telling the story? Who is deciding what is history or what is relevant? Whether it's an oral tradition, whether it's the things we talk about, whether it's what we worship in our faith spaces. Is it art? Is it music? Is it writing? Is it in these books in this library? Who decides? Well, I believe it is you who decides. Your life right now is living history. And if it is valuable, again, I urge you to protect it and preserve it. So here are a few images of a few areas of things that I thought that we're going to look at that are coded, that are clearly Black culture in America and connecting to culture that came from Africa and it's in the world. We see here in the top a family of slaves. We see the drum. We see gentlemen playing the trumpets, which is we consider a Eurocentric instrument, but a very Black image. We see a man here with the afro. The afro is code, right? It's a message. And in here we see gentlemen in kente cloth, where people who are familiar with kente know that there are different designs that mean different things. But again, if you're not in the right context, you won't know what the code means. And then here's a handsome young man doing a dance that was popular a few years ago. Maybe your children, maybe your grandchildren did this dance. This dance is called the dab. The dab was a dance that became popular in Atlanta. And it kind of means, I did that very well. Okay. It kind of means exclamation point. Whatever I just did, you might have seen Cam Newton doing it. Whatever I just did, I did it well. But again, if you don't understand the context, you won't understand the meaning. And all of these things are a part of identity, which we all have a right to enjoy and honor. So when you think about building your legacy, a big part of that is going to be understanding what do you identify as, or what do you identify with? So I thought in talking about Black history, Black is a term that often African Americans use, not necessarily people around the world, but one of the first areas where Black Americans began to speak and preserve history in this coded way was through what we call Negro spirituals. So during Negro spirituals, the story is, and I found this was myth versus fact from Visit Maryland Historic Preservation, that the myth was many people thought that Harriet Tubman sang Sweet Low, Sweet Chariot and wade in the water, but it is said, and then also follow the drinking gourd. So it's found that no, they didn't sing Follow the Drinking Gourd because that song came much later, actually from a folk group, but she actually did sing Wade in the Water. Another coded part of the story of Harriet Tubman is they called her Moses. Why did they call her Moses? Well, nicknames, we'll get to that later. Names are also codes, but it said that she sang Wade in the Water. And based on the speed of how they sang, meant if there was danger, if it was safe. And why did we need to wade in the water? Because in the water was where the bloodhounds couldn't smell you. So even though Wade in the Water was a church song, it wasn't designed to discuss slavery. It was used at the same time. So again, context code changes depend on the context that you use something. Many times, some of the first books that slaves were allowed to read were the Bible, if they were allowed to read. So Wade in the Water, they thought was a song. Wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the waters. Soft voices and wooden pews, humbled hands and closed eyes. But beneath the harmony, there was a map. Wade in the water. It wasn't decoration. It was for direction. It wasn't a metaphor. It was code. So here is one of the early books I read that I would encourage people to look at. It is The Travels of Ibn Battuta. Ibn Battuta was a Moroccan scholar who close to circumnavigated the earth before Marco Polo. But what's interesting about Ibn Battuta is he was only writing journals. He was only journaling what was happening in his life. So he often went to pilgrimage to Mecca, but he was able to travel to North Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, East Africa, the Swahili coast, Persia, Iraq, Anatolia, and the Byzantine world. Not just that, he went to Central Asia, India, the Maldives, Sri Lanka, Southeast Asia, and China under the Yuan dynasty, West Africa, and Mali during the reign of Mansa Musa. So what is significant about him, and again, as I remind you about your own legacy, something as simple as your journals can be useful later. And like I said, I can keep one, but he describes in this book everything from their culture, what they ate, how they dressed, those that had royal demeanor, those that did not. And they're just firsthand accounts. So how do we know what's accurate history? We usually know because it layers on top of other things. So your words, your journals, your Facebook posts could easily be a layer. So take them seriously. Here we have Sarah Hopkins Bradford. Sarah Hopkins Bradford was the official biographer of Harriet Tubman. So even the song and the fact that it was code that I just shared with you, if it wasn't for her words, if it wasn't for her work, and if it wasn't for her being what we identify as a white woman, we might not know about the life of Harriet Tubman. It's just the truth of the matter. So that's what I said. It doesn't matter what you identify as. What it matters is that you share the truth and the history that you know is your life. What matters is that you leave a legacy. So this is Sarah Bradford. I'll read a bit about her. She was an American author, historian, and she wrote the first biographies of Harriet Tubman, which were critical for preserving her legacy. There's that word, legacy. She wrote Scenes in the Life of Harriet Tubman in 1869. And she also wrote The Moses of Her People in 1886. And to raise funds for Harriet Tubman later in her life, some of the key details about Sarah Bradford and her work with Harriet Tubman was her purpose. Bradford wrote these books to help raise money for Tubman, who was facing financial hardship in New York. Her background is she was born in New York herself, and And look, and I think it's another code, but you can tell me her pen name was Cousin Cicely. So it's interesting because now we commonly say auntie. Auntie means older woman that you respect, or nephew, younger man, not necessarily blood, but that you respect like family. But Sarah's nickname, pen name, was Cousin Cicely. So hey, cousin. And her content happened to be biographies, but sometimes they were other accounts of life from the Underground Railroad, the Civil War, and about Harriet Tubman, who they also called Moses. So she is a woman who built her legacy by telling other people's stories. So what are some reliable history with some evidence of where's history? So we talked a little bit about firsthand accounts. So Harriet Tubman didn't write her own, but we're going to look at some shortly. Letters or journals, like what we just talked about with Ibn Battuta. We're going to look at art and literature. And now we have science that is actually carbon dating things that is changing a big portion of what we've known as history. And then we also have DNA evidence. There's a really good documentary that came from National Geographic that I enjoy that's called The Human Family Tree. And they carbon date, they do they call the genome test, where they swab people, 100 people in New York, and they trace everyone's history back to the continent of Africa, which I thought was important because maybe we got some things confused in history when we began to discuss race. And again, this is why it's important that we do talk about these things during Black History Month so that we can present and continue to build legacies that are based on the truth that we now know. So in archaeology, we'll talk about archaeologists and people like Zora Neale Hurston, who wasn't even seen as an anthropologist. But we'll talk about archaeology, and we'll talk about oral tradition. So even the things you say right now and being able to capture them, this podcast right now, this that we're sharing on Facebook, one day will be a part of our legacy. So thank you for joining me. So we know, again, Black History Month was started by Carter G. Woodson in 1927. And a big part of that was because, unfortunately, and it's not unique to America, it's the world, that oftentimes it was imagined back to building your legacy. Sometimes people don't want you building your house next door to their house, right? Your house may detract from their house. They might have wanted that parcel of land. And that's just human nature. However, that should not stop your intention to build, right? Especially when your intention to build is for the good of others. So we do know that there are books that have been banned and challenged. There are campaigns to remove books in many cases, sometimes in public schools, sometimes in public libraries. And I hope that we can keep the books where they need to be. And again, and we'll talk about this later, this is why the legacy that you build, the words that you share, your true experiences will help eventually also change policy. I believe that we should not always wait until we have a problem to try to change policy. The things we do beforehand could shape that. So if politicians already know that you support or in a certain area, then they might just, well, we don't want to bother. But I just wanted to share, and I'm not going to go deep into this subject, but a few of the books that have been challenged or banned are Black Reconstruction area books by W.E. Du Bois. I have The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, Beloved by Toni Morrison, Kindred by Octavia Butler, The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, Homegoing by Ya Gaisai, Stamped, this is by Ibram X, Blackbirds in the Sky by Brandy Colbert, Young Adult History of the Tulsa Massacre has been challenged. Their Eyes Are Watching God, and I love this book. Why would they mess with Their Eyes Are Watching God? It's a classic book by Zora Neale Hurston. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou, and This Is My America by Kim Johnson. There's just a few books that have been banned, challenged, or removed from public places. And I want you again to just keep building your legacy because again, it's up to you to decide what's important and what's not important, not me. So I want to talk a little bit about the reality of enslavement. I mean, we really can't talk about Black history without talking about that. In America, slavery was a reality. And again, as I said, we can't change history, but we can decide what is important and build upon it. And we can honor people based on the materials that we have. So I wanted to share these few materials we have. Frederick Douglass. If you don't know who Frederick Douglass is, Frederick Douglass famously wrote 3 autobiographies dealing with his life from slavery to freedom. And one of the most renowned is The Narrative and Life of Frederick Douglass as an American Slave, and that's published in 1845. And this was an influential memoir that exposed the brutalities of slavery during his life. We also have Olaudah Equiano. And I did read this book, but for most of his life, he was renamed as Gustavus Vassa. And he was an abolitionist. And he also wrote his memoir. And it tells about how he was taken from what we know as modern day Nigeria and enslaved as a child in West Africa. He was shipped to the Caribbean and he was sold as a Navy officer. And he was sold twice more after that, after his freedom in 1766. And finally, the pretty little lady down here, as a young lady, is Phillis Wheatley. Phillis Wheatley was an American writer who was considered the first African-American author who published a book of poetry. So she wrote poetry. So again, I just want to remind, you're not limited to what you share. Just be mindful that what you're sharing will be a part of history. But Phillis Wheatley was born in West Africa. She was sold into slavery at age 7 or 8, they're not sure, and transported to North America, where she was purchased by the Wheatley family of Boston. She learned to read and write, and the family was so in awe of her talent that they helped her publish her poetry. So again, we all have play a role in what will be our history. And then here to the left, if you can see my screen, Mrs. Lula Flanagan. So in the United States, they did a slave narrative project where they went and interviewed 2,300 American slaves to hear in their own words what their experiences were. Many of them couldn't write, and many of them couldn't speak what we consider proper or normal common American English. But I have a piece here. So to honor her, I would like to read her words that she shared when she was age 78. Miss Lula Flanagan. She says, "They say I was just 4 years old when the war ended, but I surely remember the day when those Union soldiers came down the road. Mary and Willie Durham were my mother and father, and they belonged to Master Spence Durham in Wilsonville during slavery times. When word came that the Union soldiers were on their way, Master Spence and his sons were off at war. Miss Betsy told my father to take and hide the horses down in the swamp. My mother helped Miss Betsy sew the silver into the cotton mattress ticking, and Union soldiers never did find our white folks' horses or the silver. Miss Martha, who was Master Spence and Miss Betty's daughter, was playing the piano when the Union soldiers came down the road. 2 soldiers came into the house and asked her to play a tune they liked. I forget the name of the tune. Miss Martha got up from the piano and said she wasn't going to play no tune for those Yankee men. The soldiers took her outside and set her up atop front post in the front of the house and made her sit there until the whole regiment passed away. She sat there and cried, but she never did play a tune for those Yankee men." So I really appreciate Miss Lula Flanagan for sharing her memory. She closes it with the Union soldiers did still plunder and steal all that the family had. But she did not seem to have an opinion one way or another. She just appeared to offer the basic truth. So again, I honor her for that. Thank you, Lula. So again, I just shared that comes from between 1936 and 1938. It was called the Federal Writers Project. They interviewed more than 2,300 formerly enslaved African Americans across 17 states. So the book here that you see at the top, The Florida Slave, that's just one of the productions that came from that set of interviews. But if you ever would like to read the words firsthand, I was able to see an exhibit in Florida where you could actually see the words, where even some of them who could write. So it was amazing, and it's really touching when you come firsthand with real truth and real lives that lived just like yours. So please take a look at those when you have a chance. So one of the again the strongest level of evidence is firsthand accounts, right? So your firsthand accounts will be very important. Here is a book that I read called Flash of the Spirit. Now, this is not a firsthand account, but it's written by Robert Ferris Thompson. He's a professor at Yale University, and his interest is in how culture had survived from West Africa through the transatlantic slave trade and still exists. The culture still exists in America. So things like improvisation, jazz, so many things in the culture, the drum. So when you have a chance, this is a great book. He talks about these things that existed in Yoruba religion. And it's not about the religion, but about, again, the culture, the way we dress in America, the way we talk in America. In many ways has a lot to do, or we know about the Gullah culture. These are almost synonymous. They so much mirror the culture of West Africa. So I know a lot of times people say, well, the people in Africa, they don't associate with us, whether they do or they do not. You cannot hide the fact. So you have a scholar who that is what he studies. So if you have a chance, it's a great book to take a look at called Flash of the Spirit. And here's another book. It's not a firsthand account, but it is very coded. This is another book I read that I really enjoyed called Orinoco. Orinoco, or The Royal Slave, A True History. It's written by a lady named Afra Ben. Afra Ben was an English woman. So she was an English playwright and author, and she published this book in 1688. So we're going way back. The interesting thing is that the title of the book is The Royal Slave, A True History, but it's a fiction book. So possibly she had to frame it as a fiction for safety. Also, she was a well-traveled woman. She had traveled to Suriname, which is the country where the slaves in the story were sold. So the slaves were kidnapped, and they happened to both be royalty while they were in Africa. They were tricked onto ships, and they were actually ended up being sold onto the same plantation, the prince and a princess. But they were in the story, they are of such high quality people that even the slave owners just gave them free reign. Orinoco and his princess, they could do whatever they want. They could take long walks and stroll by the lake. And eventually one day, the stroll got so nice, they decided they didn't want to go back. But that's where the problem presented itself. So she asked him, I love you so much, and I love our life so much that I don't want to go back to being a slave. I would rather die at your hands than to go back to that. And so that it ends kind of sad. He helps her out, and then he buries her in a bed of flowers. And then he's found because of the smell of her body. And even though he was previously loved at that point, he is then executed for being disobedient. And so it's an interesting story of why Afra Ben would write this story. Again, I believe, and I can't prove that it is, she put her reputation and her work on the line by telling this story, but I believe she felt that it was a story that needed to be told. This is a friend of mine, an associate, and her name is Bee Hines. Bee Hines B.L. Hines, she doesn't like to say B. Hines. B.L. Hines is the first Black columnist of the Miami Herald, which is where I'm from, and it's a major paper there where I live. And this is just one of the books. She's still writing. She has a blog if you want to find her out there. And she is a Pulitzer Prize nominee, journalist, and professional speaker. And this is one of her books that I really like, The Ugly Feeling. And The Ugly Feeling obviously is a book for kids. But it's about how when she was a little girl, she had a best friend who was what we call light-skinned, light-skinned. And even though they were really good friends, she would always only notice when people told her friend how pretty she was. And she didn't feel that people told her that she was pretty. And again, there's codes and then there's in context. It's hard to understand, right? And in the Black community, we talk about colorism, and maybe for people who don't identify as Black, they don't get it. What do you mean you're not beautiful? What do you mean she's not beautiful? What do you mean you don't like your hair? But in the context, it is about, well, who is preferred possibly by the dominant culture. And therefore, many little girls and many children have to ask that question. How do I identify? Do I identify? Do I want to identify? There was a study I remember they did where they gave little Black children a doll baby. They got a choice, and they didn't want the dark-skinned doll baby, which was sad to many of us who know that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and that we needed to do more socially and culturally to let all these children know that beauty comes in different shapes and forms and sizes. But beautifully, in this book, one day she had an epiphany. Her mom and dad told her she was beautiful every day. And her godmother saw her frowning one day when someone told her friend that she was pretty. And she said, "Why are you frowning?" And she said, "That look on your face tells me that you're having the ugly feeling." And she said, "That ugly feeling is called jealousy." And this is, I think, appropriate even in our discussion of race and Black history, because sometimes we don't know why someone doesn't like us. And the friends are feeling like, oh, they're just jealous, right? But we don't know. But it's okay that people have the ugly feeling. We can't stop them from having the ugly feeling, but we can affect the ugly feeling in ourselves. And we can remember that many people believe that we're beautiful, not necessarily always externally, but internally. So when the godmother told her and reminded her that she was beautiful, she remembered to always put up a red flag and remember that there was no need anymore for the ugly feeling. This is a great book for children and discusses that issue of colorism among African Americans. So going from that, I want to go further with identity and legacy. This is a list of African American or Negro organizations that were started between 1900 into the 1940s. I have intentionally included my organization in 1935 here, the National Association of Negro Business and Professional Women's Clubs Incorporated, on purpose. But there was such, and there's hundreds more, but these are ones that all of these are still surviving. And the majority, and I didn't know the National Bar Association, I didn't even know that was a Black thing. But it is because Black attorneys at the time that it was organized couldn't join other attorney organizations. And so many of these organizations were started for the very same reasons. And again, they took what happened in history, but built legacies anyway. And so again, so I honor these organizations, so I will call their names. You have the National Negro Business League, the Niagara Movement, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, the NAACP. We also have the National Urban League, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, Universal Negro Improvement Association, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. We have the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, the National Bar Association, there it is, 1925. You have the Nation of Islam, moving too fast. The Nation of Islam, the National Association of Negro Business Professional Women's Clubs Incorporated, the National Council of Negro Women, the National Negro Congress, Southern Negro Youth Congress, Congress of Racial Equality, United Negro College Fund, and Civil Rights Congress. So you probably know a few of these, and there are some that I can see clearly have been excluded. So again, make sure that you write your legacy, so your bricks will be there to be seen. This is a place I actually got. So while we're talking about institutions, I'm moving into there's different ways. Who built bricks? Where are the bricks that remind us? Where's the proof? So those were organizations, institutions that I just named. This is another one. This is the Clifton Heritage National Park, that used to be the Wiley Plantation in Nassau, Bahamas. I was able to visit this and actually visit with one of the descendants of the plantation, one of the slave descendants. And this little building, I'm not sure which one, but they had one of these buildings that was in the back was a church that was right alongside the beach. And I was impressed by the brickwork. I was like, whoa, they were building real houses out of brick, because I don't know, I just thought that every slave dwelling was wood or something, but they were brick and they were stuccoed, and one was a church. And I kept thinking, I wonder what those slaves were praying about, especially that they were right next to the ocean. And I could only imagine, because I grew up on the beach, because in the ocean always reminds me of God. And I kept thinking, I bet they were praying to go home. And I bet they were looking and wondering, would a boat ever come back and take them home? I can't imagine what else they could have been praying about. But on the beautiful side, this is some other things that I learned while there. So I got over here on the right side, pictures of what they call junkanoo. So the junkanoo tradition comes out of, and you see they're dressed like what we would think is somewhat Afrocentric or African based. In the UK or England, or they have what they call Boxing Day. So Boxing Day is often synonymous with what we call Christmas, is you give a box, you give a gift. Well, the slaves were allowed on Boxing Day to not have to work, and they were free to celebrate how they wanted to. So they can dance, they can sing, and they could make drums. So you see the drums there. When I was in Nassau, they had young boys stretching the goat hides and making their own drums to prepare for the Junkanoo Parade, where they play Christmas songs now. But it is very still reminiscent of African culture, where they play the cowbell. That's an actual instrument. They ring a big cowbell. They play the drum, and their costumes are now made of paper, but historically were made of things like seashells, feathers, leaves, whatever they could find. So these paper costumes that they make now are reminiscent of those natural things that they had when they were slaves. So again, history happened, legacy is intentional. So here's another institution that we know. We all know. We're here, we do. And I know because I'm a graduate of Talladega College. So the Emancipation Proclamation is here on the left side. So only 3 years after the Emancipation Proclamation did the founders, who we know, Thomas Tarrant and Savory, went to request the charter to make an institution for learning for African Americans, for the children of the slaves. This building that you see here is the first building of Talladega College, which it had been previously many other things. It had, I believe, served as a Civil War prison. It had served as a school for whites previously, but at this point, these men, only 3 years later, said, we want it. And they did what they could to buy it. And so they built those bricks. And those who live in Talladega know about all the other development, the new buildings that are there now. But again, institutions matter, right? It's what you think is important. So those men thought it is important that their children be educated. And thankfully, it's become a part of my history. So what's in a name? Again, we talked a little bit about identity, what people are called. I can't help but talk about some things that we don't want to talk about, but want to talk about him anyway, because that's what I do. What's in the name? Cassius Clay. Cassius Clay was not only Cassius Clay, he was Cassius X. And then he was Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali had a hard time changing his name. People did not want him to change his name. So here's some bricks that were built based on these realities of the name. So you have that this movie, What's My Name by Muhammad Ali. This is an old PBS production that aired right after From Cassius Clay to Muhammad Ali. Down here in the middle, we actually have Harriet Tubman. Now, I don't know, I didn't know they had pictures back then. It says, but this is, it was her and her baby. But some other names that we know that Black people have been called, and I had to ask ChatGPT, is because I just thought they were names, real names of people, like the Moors. I thought that the Moors were, I don't know, but I learned that Moor was a name that other people called a group of people. So as we know, the word Negro or the N word, the infamous N word, or even Black or even brown people. In many cases, these are not the names that people have called themselves. So there's a challenge between what do you want to call yourself? What do you call yourself? Right? Have we thought about that? Is it important? Is it important? In my organization, they have decided to keep the name Negro to remind of a time that that's what they were called, not what they called themselves. That's what they were called, and that's why the organization was needed. So I want you to start thinking about, is it important what you are called? Here's Langston Hughes. Here's a book that he wrote, The Book of Negro Humor. And then Zora Neale Hurston in Their Eyes Were Watching God, which again, I said is one of my favorite stories. The main character, she's married 3 times, but her best husband is her third husband. He's the brokest husband, is tea cake. So just wanted to talk again about the meaning of names, the coding in names. Is it important to you? Well, think about that as you continue to build. And oh, here with Dave Chappelle, I included Dave Chappelle because he continues to build bricks. If you watch him, you're aware that he uses the N word quite a bit. And I'm not trying to justify or rationalize the use of it, but again, that is the material that he took to build his social commentary, which he presents in comedy. So like Richard Pryor, a lot of people know Richard Pryor. So I actually believe he's doing a great job in helping present the questions that we really need to think about, but doing it in the historically beautiful way of what we call comedy to make sure that it's digestible and that we can talk about it and even sometimes laugh about it. And so I want to talk about expression. For those here in Talladega, we know that this little picture up here is Talladega College. When I attended Talladega College, these murals were up here on the wall. This is one of the murals that depicts the development of Talladega College. So for the early students, the way that they would pay tuition is they had to work. They had to farm, they had to build, they had to do whatever they had to do to pay. It was never free. And this is the artist, Hal Woodruff. Hal Woodruff was from Atlanta, but his specialty or his interest as a historian and artist was living conditions of Blacks in the South and poverty. And so it's very interesting that he, through his work, was able to discuss and present these realities and his own take on it. These murals that he painted that were at Talladega College, and some of them still are brightly colored. They are very beautiful, and they just command attention. Some of them are bigger. They are all bigger than me. But if you ever have the chance to learn more about the Talladega murals and Hal Woodruff, please do. But again, continuing to build a legacy. So this was Barack Obama, which we all know as the first and right now the only Black American president of the United States. He wrote his memoirs in the little book up here, The Promised Land, but he also wrote The Audacity of Hope. And the artwork here was the artwork done by the artist here. And I And you can see the Obama picture behind him there. But this was the famous imagery that we all knew from the Barack Obama campaign. That was one of the most publicly, it probably was the first major social media campaign that we ever saw. And he changed what campaigning has been for everybody since then. But this artwork, of course, it's not Obama's artwork, it's a contribution by the artist. So again, however you contribute to building legacy, please be involved and please keep the hope, right? We keep some hope. These are more books I hope that you will take a look at. Here we have Dr. Joy Buolamwini. Dr. Joy, her specialty is looking at how AI is depicting and dealing with people of color at this time. She has a great video on YouTube and several different talks, but one specifically is called Ain't I a Woman? And how AI right now is recognizing African American women as men. It doesn't recognize our hairstyles. It would say if you had an afro that you have a hat on your head. And she does explain, so don't be confused that this is not intentional. She doesn't believe it to be intentional. It happens to be that there's not enough coders for people who care to make sure that that information is included in what AI can do right now. And possibly in the next few years, if you, your grandkids are willing, that will be addressed. But again, to my conversation, everything you do right now, everything you present is a part of the code that will be your legacy. So it's her mission, she says, to protect what is human in a world of machines. So Blacks, African Americans continue to be human. So I hope that you will learn more about her. This is her book, Unmasking AI. We were able to give this to several young people last year to get them interested. So we not just be consumers, but to actually be involved, as I'm asking you, to be involved in the code that will present what is life right now. And then one of the final areas I want to talk about here is resistance. A big part of Black culture is resistance. It can be controversial. I'm not going to go controversial with it, but it is, I believe that it's worth discussing. Down here, we have the Black Panthers. The Black Panthers' goal was to address civil rights and inequities in the United States in dealing with specifically civil rights is the police. And, in code, Black people, we have the term popos, right? A friend of mine that's a teacher was just joking to me the other day that the kids say popo. Well, why is it such a big deal? And I think, again, I said there's in context. I want people who don't identify as African Americans to understand that once upon a time, slavery was legal. And the implications of that meant that as long as there was free labor, there was a lot of income to be made. So when slavery ended, a lot of people lost income. Gone with the Wind, it's one of my favorite movies, but it reminds us that the economic structure in America changed when people did not have free labor anymore. I wish I could get some free labor on my business, but it changed things. And so as a result, it was very easy to criminalize the behavior of African Americans. And in the penal system, this is the only place who doesn't have rights are criminals. So unfortunately, sometimes it was easy to pressure certain police and officials to arrest people for various things because it was easy to do. And so these are some media that address that. So this is Ava DuVernay. She is the director of the movie Selma, but she also did this film here, 13th, which it talks about the 13th Amendment and the lack of rights for people who are considered prisoners or criminals. Martin Luther King, I lost my notes, but Martin Luther King was arrested over 23 times for things such as loitering, standing outside of a courthouse while his friend was in court. This is a picture of him actually being arrested. And fortunately, he continued to build his legacy despite what was happening in history. Many of the Black Panthers, some of them still remain in prison. This movie here with Eddie Murphy, which a lot of people have seen, and Martin Lawrence Life, is about two men that were arrested wrongly and spent life in prison. And these are things that, again, in context, African Americans know about, generally accept and understand. And so we're not always trustful of the law. And it's not because we intend to be criminals. However, the history has been problematic. So let's change that. And then here we have the Black Lives Matter group, where you see in this picture, many of these people are not what we consider Black. But they used, again, the coding of the fist, which came here from the Black Panthers and other efforts, and just the representation of, could be strength, power, defiance. Like I said, depends on the context that you look at it. So those are some more people who continue to build bricks. The Black Lives Matter made major efforts through social media, which I'll be talking more to you about in a moment. And this is the final layer. Now, this is about Latino and Hispanic people, but I used it I want to use it as an example to discuss why it's important for you to build your legacy and not someone else. So I have a friend who specializes in the connection between Latino and Black. And I was really confused. And I said, well, what's the difference between Latino and Hispanic? And I don't know, do any of you? Nobody knows, right? Well, I didn't know either. I was like, well, I've heard both words, and I would kind of use them synonymously. And I would be very careful personally to use either one, because I wouldn't want to offend anyone. But so I found there was a whole bunch of these online, and none of them were really attributed to anybody that I would consider reputable. But it's interesting that they mirror the same information. So let's look. Latino is Brazilian, French Guiana, Guadeloupe, Haiti, Martinique, St. Bartholomew, and St. Martin, but not Spain. And over here on the Hispanic side is only Spain. And it makes clear, does not include Brazil, French Guiana, Guadeloupe, Haiti, Martinique, St. Bartholomew, and St. Martin. Well, I'm like, well, how is that decided? And then it has these countries here in the middle that maybe that means they go either way. And the other image depicts the same thing, but the other picture depicts it in flags. So maybe this is a nation concern. And again, I bring this to say there's an urgency for you to tell your story, for you to decide what's important. Is it important what someone calls you? Then say so. Is it important what you call someone? Then say so. But I believe that this was created by people who are not included anywhere on this on these diagrams. So for you, I want you to make sure to not let this happen to you. So I begin to close here, and I close with a question. And those are here with me. If you like, you can answer. But if someone 100 years from now had access to your words, your posts, your recordings, what would they believe mattered most to you? You thinking about it? Like I said, I began this. I mean, if someone looked at my words, my activities, my recordings a year ago, they would have said she's a workaholic and not much more. Today, they might think that I am self-centered and I like to post my pictures, and that's okay. But I can say I made a decision to make sure that my digital footprint is what I intended to be. To make sure somebody says, oh, why you always got to post all these goody two shoes, advice, and because I made a decision what kind of bricks I wanted to build from. That's what I want you to do. So if you had a hard time answering that, it's okay. So I put a couple of these are Facebook posts right here. So one is from Louis Armstrong. Louis Armstrong is gone. But here's a photo of him playing for his wife, Lucille, in front of the Sphinx in 1961. So your legacy will outlive you. Your words will be the code. Your words will be the keys that will walk you into rooms and places that you have never been. Here's a post. Tuesday in Mobile, Alabama has been designated Hosea London Day. He has been marching with the historic Accessory Band 1883 for 50 years. This band is the oldest walking brass band in the United States, and they are featured every year in almost every Mardi Gras parade in Mobile. Congratulations, Mr. Trumpeter. It may seem so ordinary, but your life is history, and it is the history that will build for years to come. So your digital footprint is tomorrow's primary source. It'll be your words. Your Facebook post from today will be history. Your posts, your blogs, your podcasts, your films, everything you do on your phone, your ebooks, your metadata. Metadata is what you search on Google, what you search on ChatGPT will be history. You have no control over it. So be mindful. These are a few people that I listed. Here's Miles Davis. The lady here, she's a famous bassist. I lost my notes, but she, right, it'll come back to me. Then we got Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's a famous astrophysicist. And then we have Prince. I had Prince here because Prince was one of the first people who made history streaming and protecting their own music. So again, in the social media space, again, if you had something special, if you took time to build a rose garden and you know your neighbor had really bad kids, wouldn't you build a little fence around it? So in the same way, make sure you build a little fence around your words. I know like Dr. Fobb, she's working on a book now, right? Another book. Your books, you want to make sure your books are copyrighted, right? That you own the rights to your content. So everything that you're creating right now is, if it's important, as I said, you decide. I want you to own it. So to close, your digital footprint is a legacy architecture. You're designing it, you're planning it, your photos, your podcasts, your journal entries, conferences, programs. What are you talking about to young people? Are you even talking to young people? Is this relevant? Right? Is Black History Month just a month where we just talk about people that have been gone for a long time? Or do we talk about the relevance today? What it means to them? So is your life, is your legacy being archived, or is it disappearing? Is it disappearing into the scroll? So for history to become legacy, as I present to you, and I hope that you will, it will only become that if you decide to preserve it. So I'll close this part and I'll open up for comments. I'm open to talk all the time, obviously. I like to talk. You can find me at my website, superflyers.biz. I have a chat thing there. Or you can find me right here on Facebook at Nikki Stiles-Baker. I'm working on building my following. I'm now at 8.3 followers. I'm really proud of that because last year this time I was not caring about that. But now I realize this my legacy to build. For those that are interested, again, my interest is making sure that we present our legacy with honor. And so I have a free branding guide. If you would like to use it, you can get it on my website. It's called the Slay the Brand Game branding guide. It's free. If you go there, you can get it. With that, I say thank you.
That was wonderful.
Thank you.
It was, and thank you for streaming it live so a lot of people can really enjoy it. I thank you for coming today. There are refreshments on the table outside the door, please.
Okay.
Cookies, enjoy. And Nikki will be back, I hope. We're talking about doing a program together. So I know the one. So this one's going to be on her book.
Mm-hmm.
Lola, I have a copy on my phone.
Oh, good. that just was an audio book, but you know what I really would like to do, and I want to invite you, I want to challenge you all today to write any memory that you feel is significant to Black history. I shared some of mine today, like visiting the plantation, attending an HBCU, being a part, but share something today. You can share it on my page. You can share it to this post. Those of you that are out there still watching, share with me, please, a piece of your history that you believe is worth sharing in case you never do it again, in case you don't see tomorrow. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you to the library. Thank you to the library director and all the staff that have been so helpful today. Somebody's saying, get out of there.
I'm sorry, we're having our place outside, they're working on it, and some of it's inside, so they're gonna actually do a panel where we can control lights. We don't have to go outside.
Okay, I'm going to say goodbye to the people on Facebook. I noticed we had a few people. Julius Foster, Kahinde, he's actually there in Africa. He says that they call talking, yes, they call it talking drum in Africa. And they talked about Gumbe. Kahinde said after escaping from slavery in Maryland in 1838, Douglass became a national leader of the abolition movement in Massachusetts and New York and gained fame for his oratory and incisive anti-slavery writing. So we had quite a few people on Facebook commenting, and I just want to thank you all, and we will see you later. I'll see you on Friday for Tap In. Thank you. Any comments, questions? Snack time. You're welcome. This is recorded, so it will be on Facebook for some time if anybody can share it.
Yeah, that would be good. But yeah, I love the fact that it's recorded on Facebook. Thank you so much. And the fact that we're virtual and other people can hear it.
Okay, thank you. Well, it's snack time and happy Black History Month.
Thank